So here we are in my basement studio. Here to show you how we do my wife's podcast, Lip Gloss and Laptops, at lipglossandlaptops.com. I've got the Zoom H4 recorder here, which I've actually mounted on a camera tripod. It's got a cool tripod adapter tray that it sits in here, you can see, which is attached to the tripod base, and then I just clip that in here. So it uses a standard camera tripod, not incidentally a mic stand like this, but a camera tripod. Mounts on there flat, you can see the screen, you can see the red record button on there, and I set this up in a certain way so that it's easy to record. What I do is I have the phantom power on and I have the mic inputs here with the XLR jacks instead of using the built-in mics, which would pick up a lot of room noise. I use these mics over here. I'll talk about those in a minute. So I set up XLR. I use a bit of low cut to get rid of any rumble from the mics that's built in there. I also use the limiter that's built into the Zoom so that if they get extra loud or move in and out from the mics, it doesn't overload anything. And finally, there's a setting on here that lets you mix the two channels into a mono mix. It's not actually really mono, it's stereo, but both sides are the same. The good thing about that is if you record in full stereo, each host's mic, each host's mic is on the left or the right hard panned, and you end up having to mix it in post-production. And since the two of them are talking and I don't really care whether they're separated in people's headphones, I just mix it to mono right during recording so that we don't even have to worry about that and I don't have to do anything later. I record it generally as uncompressed wave audio, so CD quality audio. Could do it for MP3 directly in here, but because of some post-processing stuff I do later and to maintain maximum quality, that's the way I set it. So I have the two mics here. The two mics that are plugged in are both MXL condenser mics. You can see it there. Basic sort of studio style condenser mic. This one's got a sort of spider shock mount. That one doesn't because the spider shock mount broke. It's a cheap mic, but you know the shock mount was fairly cheap. It didn't last. The mics are doing great. This is an MXL 770. This is an MXL 990. Very similar. The only real difference is the color. This one's black, and the black one, the 770, has a low cut, which I turn on, and 10 dB pad, which I don't use in this particular situation. They're both on mic stands, boom mic stands with these pop screens in front of them so the hosts can talk without driving everything insane. Those are plugged directly into the H4 with the settings I talked about before. I've got two sets of headphones here. These are the Audio-Technica ATH M50s, which I've reviewed on IHR, and these are the Sennheiser HD 280 Pro headphones. Both good headphones. Both sealed, as I said, so they don't let sound in or out, best for studio use, and both in the sort of $100 to $200 range. So not super expensive, but not super cheap either. If I pop the cover here, you can take out the SD card, which is a standard SD card like you'd use in a digital camera or any other kind of recorder, and we can plug that into the computer, which is what I'm going to show you next for the post-production segment. Okay, so we're back upstairs in my house. This is actually where I do a lot of my editing, which is the bedroom. I have my MacBook laptop here, and what I have is the SD card that I took out of the Zoom H4 recorder. This SD card is pretty cool because what it does is it's a SanDisk Ultra 2, I think it's Ultra 2 Plus, something like that. Anyway, what you can do is you can actually pop the SD card apart and flip it open, and it has a little USB port right on it. So you don't need a card reader. You just take it, plug it right into the laptop like that. All right, so we're looking at my MacBook's desktop here, and here's the file which I dragged in from the SD card. I renamed it. I drag this WAV file onto Fission, and it opens it up and gives me a waveform. You can see that the waveform's not that wide, actually, straight out of the H4. What I could do is I could actually normalize it here if I selected the file and clicked the normalize button here, but I'm not going to do that because I actually process it differently. So save audio here. And what I do here is I actually save it out as an AIFF file, and I save it mono, because the file I saved, even though it says mono when I get it out of the H4, it's actually a stereo file with the same things on both sides, which makes it twice as big as it needs to be. So it'll write out here. Okay, now that file's written out, I can quit that program, and I have my mono file here. What I use next is another program that I've talked about quite a lot, the Levelator, which is basically a leveler, limiter, does all sorts of cool stuff, really good for speech, not so great for music. It's from the Conversations Network. Basically just drag that file I saved onto the levelator, and it will process it. It'll take a few minutes. I'll actually skip through that on the video so you don't have to watch it. And it will do all sorts of nice stuff to the audio. It'll make it as loud as it can be, do some compression and limiting, even out the levels of the two voices, just do all sorts of stuff. There's no settings, it just does it, and you can listen to it, and if you don't like it, you can use your original file, and if you do like it, well, then you're done. So I just usually, walk away, get a coffee, let it do its thing for a while here, and I'll come back when it's done, because it usually takes a few minutes. All right, now the levelator's done here, I can quit that. And if you look over here on the side, you can see that I've got the original file that I got out of the H4, the mono file that I saved, not strictly necessary, but saved some space. And this is the output file from the levelator, which has now been boosted. Actually, if I take that back into Fission, which will show you the waveform, you'll see the difference. If you remember, the old version had a fairly narrow waveform. Now the waveform is much bigger, and it's limited fairly, not too extremely, but it's definitely a louder file, as you can see from the shape of the waveform here. So the levelator's done a lot of work there, and I didn't have to do anything. It's great. Okay, so we're done with that. Next stage is to go into GarageBand, our favorite old little program. So what I've got here is, this is a previous episodes file that I've just made a copy of. And so what we have here in GarageBand, once it opens up here, Okay, so here's GarageBand. What we've got is we've got the voice track up here. We've got background music track here. Background music here, and there's a song that we put at the end of each episode. So what I'm going to do, this is just the intro here, if you listen to it. That's the network they belong to, and a little intro music. And then I usually want the talking to start right about there, as the music fades out. So what I'll do is I'll go back to the desktop here, grab the output file, and just drag it up here, and let GarageBand import it. So it actually makes a copy of that, that output AIFF file, puts it in there, it'll render the waveform eventually. And then I scroll forward, it's pretty long, it's like an hour long, and I get to the end here. I've actually got background music here that fades back in towards the end of the show, and then peaks out at the end, and then I've put in a song here. Normally I would do that later, but I have it pre-done here for you. So you can listen to what the end sounds like. They're just talking at the end of the show. And the song starts in there. Scroll forward to the end. Over here, that's where the song fades out, and I've put the ID bumper at the end of the song. Same thing that we had at the beginning, that's just the way we set up the show. It does a little thing, and then it ends. Usually I don't listen through the whole thing, I don't do any editing to their audio, that's just the way it goes. So now we're ready to export. Hit the share menu here, send song to iTunes. And I've got the presets here to compress it on the fly. This is something new in the newest versions of GarageBand, where you can do the MP3 encoding straight out of GarageBand. MP3 encoder, I've got it custom set, fairly low bit rate because I don't want the files to be too high. So it's stereo, 80 kilobits per second. It'll be about 35 megs, still a fairly decent size. That's why I make it a low bit rate. Hit share, and it's going to go through this whole rigmarole where it mixes down the file, normalizes it, and sends it over to iTunes. I'll save you having to wait for that and meet you over in iTunes once this is done. Okay, so now we have the file here in iTunes. If I do a file get info on this, it shows me the the name of the file, the various ID3 tags that have gone in. I usually add a few more, maybe the episode number here, URL, copyright, that sort of stuff. Add some artwork if you want, all that sort of stuff. Click OK. Then if you want, you can control click, or I think under advanced here, maybe under file, show in finder, and then that'll show you where the file is, and you can FTP it up to your server and all that sort of stuff. And I'm done.